and Joe are very anxious to get started. Susan, Portland has spent days trying to get the technology to work correctly for us, but this is Linda and Joe Corcoran, who, some of you know each other well, but they had this wonderful trip to China, and very nicely agreed to come in and spend some time with us, showing us their slides and telling us about their experience, because it really was a very interesting travel experience. So, does anybody need any water or coffee or anything before we start? I can get you one.
Water.
You want some more water, Susan? Yeah, after all of your working out. Okay, I'm gonna go get water,
All right, thank you.
and we can turn the lights off when
Sure.
we start, but you want to speak first and then we
Yeah,
can turn?
sure.
Okay,
Sure.
we'll go do that. Be right back.
Thank you.
Dave, do you need water after?
No, I'm good, thank you. Okay, well, thanks for coming. I really didn't expect anybody to show up, especially with the icy weather, but much more than I thought. Anyway, yeah, I'm a longtime resident of Georgetown. If you take out about a 35-year clip in the middle, okay, we've come back basically. And we went on it was advertised as a 14-day trip to China last November. And what it really turns into is about a 12-day, because you cross the international date line and you have a 14-hour flight, and you lose a lot of time in there. So it winds up being actually about 12 days, maybe even 11 and a half. But it was very good, and we covered, a fairly good amount. I don't know if you can see this up here. We landed in Beijing. What they did, I thought we would be flying west. We flew from Newark, New Jersey, directly to Beijing, and I thought they would head west across the country, and they didn't. They went east actually, and went up over like Newfoundland, Greenland, over the North Pole, down over Russia, Mongolia, and to Beijing, and which is the shorter route. We were right over the capital of Mongolia, but unfortunately we were at like 38,000 feet, so we couldn't see it. But we landed in Beijing, and we were there a few days, and went and saw the Great Wall and the Forbidden City and Tiananmen Square and the usual things that tourists are taken to. And then we took a high-speed train, one of those bullet trains, down to Jingzhou, and then went from there, took a Yangtze River cruise for 4 days, the Yangtze River to Chongqing, and then they flew us in Sichuan Air, Chinese air that flies only in China. And they flew us to Hangshan, and then from there we went to Hangzhou, and then we took a bus to Shanghai, and we came home. So that's the route. It would be like, we've seen China, right? So it would be like somebody coming to the U.S., going to New York City for a couple days, going to D.C. for a couple days, maybe going to Miami Beach, then flying to Las Vegas, going out to see the Boulder Dam and the Grand Canyon, then flying to San Francisco, and then flying home and saying, yeah, sorry, saw the U.S., you can't do. It's such a large country, you're not going to do it in 2 weeks, but you sort of get a feel for it a little bit. Maybe it's what the government is hoping.
Thank you.
You're going to come away with, I don't know. We were on a tour by Sinorama, which is a Chinese government controlled group, basically. Well, I think they control every group that's over there, control where they go. So it's a Sinorama was operating in Canada, and we had tried to get on them a few years ago, and it was just very, very difficult. Because they wouldn't help you with anything. Said, well, if you're an American, you got to get your own visas and all this stuff, and they couldn't offer any help at all. And now they're operating out of New York City as well, Sinorama, and they can tell you, oh yeah, this group will help you, and there's a company in Boston that'll get the visa for you and all of that, and help you through the whole process. So it's easy. But Sinorama was very good. I thought it was very, very good, a very good tour. We had heard about them because we were on another tour in Europe, and I was talking to a Canadian who had taken a tour of China, and he was saying, "Oh, it's this great tour and fairly inexpensive." And I said, "What was your group?" And he said, "Oh, I can't remember." And I said, "Was it Sinorama?" And he says, "Yeah, that was it." And so we didn't just go into it blind. We went in with, knowing that somebody had already said this was really good. We again landed in Beijing, and we were there for a few days. And Linda has some pictures there of the Great Wall where we went. Let me just say, well, go ahead. You want to show the pictures of the Great Wall?
Yes, this is the Beijing entrance to the Great Wall.
One of them.
And that gives you an idea of just getting started up. There are very few people that day until a group of about fourth graders came along. They were on a school excursion. And while I barely made it up one of those stages, Joe made it up 2 or 3. Those little kids just ran all the way up.
Jealous.
This is just an entrance. They have a lot of nice old Chinese architecture. That's Joe taking a picture at the very beginning. And this is a little building right at the top. This is old Beijing. I'm hoping I have some more of the Great Wall here. This is old Beijing. They take you on a tour through there as well. I don't. I can go further up, but I think we'll do Tiananmen Square, and then I'm going to have to picture by picture go up to get to the Great Wall again. What happened is when I put the pictures on this plug, they scrambled. And I could not move them back, and so everything's out of time sync. So right now we're at Tiananmen Square. Would you like to say something about the Great Wall?
Yeah, sure. When we first landed in Beijing, I don't know really what I was expecting. I think I remember when Nixon opened China in 1970, and you went there and you saw, thousands of bicycles on the street and a couple of limousines carrying Communist Party members, and that was it. And so I knew it wouldn't be like that, but I wasn't really ready for, I was looking for a more third world appearing country than I saw. It's very modern. There are traffic jams. You could have been in New York, Paris, Boston, Tokyo, anywhere, and it would have looked about the same as it was in Beijing as far as the traffic jam went, and the modern highways and everything else. The cars you see in the road are all the same. You're going to see Mercedes and Buicks and whatever. There'll be some Chinese brands that you don't know, but for the most part, it's European and American and Japanese and Korean cars. That's what you're going to see out there, and very, very crowded. I mean, the highways and what they have done. Beijing is like a city of 23, 24 million people. And so even though modern highways and all of that, what they've done is they've restricted it to, depending on what the plate is on your car, if it's an odd or an even number, you are only allowed to drive every other day. Okay? And so it kind of forces carpooling, I guess, and finding other means to get into the city and into work. You can drive your car on the off day, but you will be fined. So some people with really important jobs and they have to get somewhere, they pay the fine, apparently. But for the most, because we saw a car, you would see most of the cars would be like odd that day, and then you'd see an even one, another one, So every so often you saw them. And, the cops aren't looking at plates, they just have cameras everywhere, take pictures, and they send you a bill. Okay, so you can't get away with it. You can't do that. So kind of interesting in that respect that the highways so modern. Everything is really modern in a lot of ways. Now, these pictures of old Beijing were interesting. They took us in there at night, and this was the old section with 1- and 2-story buildings and a lot of storefronts and homes behind them, and probably the way it was, 100 years ago. So that still exists in places, but the high-rise apartment buildings are absolutely incredible. Go ahead.
Okay, this is the monument to the people in Tiananmen Square. And we're trying to remember this building, but we're quite sure it is Chairman Mao's tomb. That is the entrance to the Forbidden City. You can see they have a picture of Chairman Mao there. You can see most of the people are Chinese. We stood out, just like when we have large groups of Chinese people here, you're wondering what they're looking at, what they're interested in. People were interested in us as well. They do a lot of touring in their own country. What was this right here, Joe? Do you remember?
No.
Okay. There's Joe looking straight at Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao is an interesting thing. Our tour guides were very open about how they feel about things, and they know we're curious about this. We might be shy to ask, and so they come right out and tell us. Chairman Mao is revered in China. He's on most of the money, the paper money. He is at the very entrance to the Forbidden City, and how they feel. One guy explained it to us that we're all people, we're all human, we make mistakes. And during the Great Leap Forward, which was a restructuring of the agricultural system, 60 million people starved, and that was a big mistake. And then the Cultural Revolution kind of got out of hand. But he still brought them forward. Later on, people ate. They have a thriving economy right now. They have a growing middle class, and they revere him. He's an important person in their history.
Yeah. He is revered, but at the same time, they realize he's human. He made mistakes. The Great Leap Forward was horrendous. When they tried to reorganize the agriculture and the government control and took away farms from people, and everybody went on a collective, and Linda said up to 60 million people died. And then they sort of wrested power away from him. To get it back, he brought on the Cultural Revolution, which is regarded now as another mistake. And so he was more or less put off to the side after that. He's revered as the person that started this whole process and got them to where they are, but they have changed policies quite a bit. So it's really a modern economic, capitalism under a communist country. It's very, very interesting. This is the Forbidden City, which where the emperor lived, and the Forbidden City. I was expecting, a big area that would have the palace and that sort of thing, and we never made it to the palace. You would need days. I don't even know. I don't think the summer palace was open. Actually, you could see it on a hill, but it is a huge area, and you just keep going to bigger buildings as such. And if you were bringing a complaint to the emperor, depending on how powerful you were, how far did you get in? Which square were you stopped at finally? And this is the last, as far as you're going, okay? And it's a huge complex where the royal family lived, and concubines, and everybody, and all the government functions were controlled there. And we spent the day there. We spent the day and went through a large amount of it, and you could see the summer palace up on a hill, and we just never got there. And I didn't even know if it was open, actually. They seemed to end at one point, and okay, everybody on the bus. And then it's like, okay, you get on the bus. So it was time. You have anything to add, Linda?
Yeah, this square right here was the square of the Dragon Lady, and she was the Empress' favorite concubine. And she was incredibly powerful. She was considered the second most powerful person in Forbidden City after the Emperor. So she had her own square, and it was, of all that we were allowed to see, it was the prettiest. It was quite nice. And I want to show you those little figures that are on the rooftops. That told people how important and wealthy you were. If there were a lot of little animals, you were very wealthy. Earlier in, when we first entered the Forbidden City, there might be just 3. The further you got into, the more little animals. I just thought that was neat. All right. And that's the garden at the Forbidden City. All right, River Cruise. Joe, if you want to talk about something, I'm going to have to go up to where we were next.
Sure. You know, if anybody has any questions, we
Yeah.
may not be able to answer them anyway. You can ask at any time, and we'll have some time at the end too. But if you have any questions at all, just ask. After the Great Wall was very nice. That was one of the primary things I wanted to see over there. But once you see it, you see it, you know. And it's like, okay, we're at the Great Wall. Now let's go somewhere else. It was, like Linda said, the 4th grade kids that showed up. And I'm climbing up, and the stairs are uneven, and it's very, very steep. And these kids just, you know, blasted by everybody. And then I could see them way up at the top. A few minutes later, it seemed. I felt bad for the teachers, actually, these kids. But it is incredible, and of course it goes on for thousands of miles, and you can access it many different places. There's several places around Beijing, and then in other parts of the country as well, up in the north. After we left Beijing, while we were there, they did take us to the, you know, stuff from the Olympics a few years ago, the bird nest, and some of those modern buildings that you saw when you watched the Olympics. We didn't really go in, we saw them from a distance, and that was about it. But Beijing is this incredibly modern city, very crowded modern city. Then they took us to a train, high-speed bullet train, to go to Jingzhou, hundreds of miles south, to get on the river cruise. And the trains in China are like nothing that you would experience in this country. You know, we're in a high-speed bullet train that was going probably around 180 miles an hour. And it would, in some cases, it blasted through stations at like 150. And now, but you know, with our view of what trains are like here and train stations here, it's not like that. What they've done is they've put it on an elevated platform. It's all brand new, okay. So you're not crossing any roads or squares or anything. You're above everything, just flying along. And it's all, you know, concrete and metal. I got out and looked at the track on one of the stations. We stopped occasionally, and here's a picture of the train. And you would, well, you can see there that the tracks, they're sort of, but there's no wooden ties. They're all cement. Okay, everything's bolted down with, you know, it's very, very modern. It's very, very modern, very stable. You know, our trains are like the 1800s. We have wooden ties. We're nailing them in. You know, nail in the rails with nails. So it's totally different. And this is a shot from the train as we left Beijing. It's up north Beijing, so it was cold, and there was a lot of wheat and things like that growing. As we grew further south, you started seeing rice paddies, and you would see water buffaloes out there in some of the rice paddies, probably like it was 1,000 years ago. But very, very, you didn't realize when the train took off, it was like, okay, I guess we're moving. And then it was very smooth. You didn't feel it. You look outside and say, we are really moving. It was almost like you were on an airplane just ready to lift off a runway when you looked out the window. But you didn't feel it at all. And very, very nice. It is funny though, Sinorama, I think they try to save a few bucks here and there. So we were gonna be on the train for a good part of the day for lunch, and they said, oh, things are expensive on the train, so, and we have to provide you lunch. That was part of the deal. Our Sinorama deal was flights, all the food, hotels, all that stuff, everything. And so, and what we did is we went to a Subway, and everybody got a sub to eat on the train, okay? And which they bought for us, which is very nice. But it was certainly a lot cheaper than them buying stuff on the train for us. Again, it's all government money somehow anyway, I guess, to a point. And another time when we were on a bus, we stopped because we had limited time to get to Shanghai actually for the night tour. We had to be there by a certain time, and the tour guide Ingrid, the tour guides would all take American or English names. Okay, I really don't know what her actual name was because probably couldn't pronounce it anyway, and so she was Ingrid. Okay, another guide was Jason, and Jason said, very famous movie, and I love this movie. Can you guess who? And somebody said, Jason Bourne? He says, yes, that's it. So he was Jason Bourne. But they were all very, very nice, and they're just trying to make it easy for you is what they're trying to do. And so Ingrid said, we could get off the highway and find a restaurant, but it's going to take time. But we want to get there, so she really kind of slanted the question. She's asking us, what should we do? But she slanted it so, we could stop along the highway, at a little rest area, and it won't take so much time. We'll make sure we get there. What do you think? Oh yeah, let's stop on the highway. So we stopped, and we stopped at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Again, you can go anywhere in the world and run into this stuff. It's everywhere. The world is a much smaller place. So it kind of interesting from that respect. The high-speed bullet train was and then there are a couple of pictures of them, I think. Are you back to the wall?
Yeah,
show some
I'm
pictures.
just showing the pictures of the steps on the wall. You're going to see that they're all uneven. So you have a low rise, a high rise, they're worn down, they're steep, and there's a railing here, but there are other places where there's no railing. Those are the fourth graders racing up the wall with their little yellow slickers on. And see how steep that is and how worn that is. And that is the wall from the city. And this is a Beijing street band, like our street bands. Just a group of citizens who get together every night and they play percussion instruments. And I have it on my phone, later I'll play it. But they don't take money, they don't have anything out there for money, they just bring a thermos of tea and they just hang out there by the shopping center and play percussion music. It was amazing. Yeah. Okay, now I have to get down to the cruise, Joe. So you entertain people. Just take me a minute, and then we have a long space. I don't have to do this anymore.
That will be fine. I'll try to entertain you. Just mentioning that this is Jason Bourne, but
Yes, it is Jason.
one of our guys. That's at a tea plantation. Actually.
Yeah.
And which I thought we were going to get to later, but that's okay. He was very interesting. He was very, very open. He was the one that said, Mao made some serious mistakes, such as the Great Leap Forward, which cost 60 million lives, up to 60 million lives. And he said something that kind of floored me, actually. And he said that, communism, the communist government, you don't challenge them. Now he works for them, okay? And he's trying to, show Westerners what the best of China, basically, working for the government. But he was very open and very honest. And matter of fact, we had on our tour group, there was a number of Chinese people, Chinese Americans, or there was this guy Jacob who was originally Taiwanese, and he had His father had actually been a general for Chiang Kai-shek.
Yeah, we'll get
And, he said, this guy is really honest and open. He really knows his stuff and he's being true. And he was really impressed with that. And so Jason at one point told us that he thought if Chairman Mao's son had not been killed in the Korean War, his oldest son, who was a big revolutionary, China today could be in the same situation as North Korea. Okay, where it went from the father to the son, and very, very radical and kind of off the beam. And so interesting that he would say that about Chairman Mao and his family, and that could have happened. Okay, if his son again wasn't killed in the Korean War in an airstrike over there. Okay.
I want to talk about traffic a little. This
Go
is
ahead,
it right here. It is incredible. And they have a lane for bicyclists and people on electric motor scooters. And pedestrians do not have the right of way. When they're crossing the street like that, people are honking their horns, inching forward, making it very uncomfortable. At one point while we were in a bus, we saw two men trapped between opposing lanes, and they had to stay there until somebody was going to give them a chance, and I didn't see it happen. However, when we were with our guide, all she had to do was wave the little flag when we were walking and following her. All the traffic stopped. No one honked their horns. They got the memo from above that when tours are going through, if you see a Westerner, you behave. And one time I was in a city by myself. I wanted to just take a little walk. People were crossing the street. I was really worried about crossing the street. As soon as I stepped in, I didn't look like everybody else. Everybody stopped. It was pretty amazing.
Go back to Westlake.
Westlake? That's too far. We'll get to it. I'll get to it again.
While you're waiting.
No,
What city is that?
I'm gonna go on.
Okay.
There we go. Oh gosh, I'm at the beginning again.
Our,
This thing has a mind of its own.
yes, our computer
Okay.
scrambles things.
Yeah,
Here we are.
yeah.
At
Okay.
one point, you had a picture of West Lake up
Yes,
there,
I'll get back to it.
which I'm sure we'll get to. West Lake was a place where it was very beautiful. We were there, it was a rainy day, and kind of skipping all over the place here. Anyway, it was where they had the G20 summit last year, the year before, where Obama went and met with all these world leaders in the G20 summit. And that's where this guy, Jason Bourne, was from, was that area. And it's extremely beautiful and all that. But he said, here's West Lake. We were there on a rainy day. And he said that before everybody showed up, the G20 showed up, they wanted to make sure that it was perfect. So they told people, go on vacation. And it was a vacation paid for by the government. So he was, because everybody has an ID card, that where they're from, what city they're from. And so all he had to do was show that ID card from this city, and which was Hangzhou, I believe. I'm a little worried about that name, actually, Hangzhou. He had this ID card, and he and his family went on a free vacation for a week. And the trains were free. They went to the coast, they went on an island, stayed at a beautiful place, had a great time, and he called it the G20 vacation. And he said, I hope they come back next year, because he really enjoyed it. And when we went there, we got there about a week after Trump went to China, okay? And they had shut down all of the factories and different things that would produce a lot of smog, so the air in Beijing was beautiful. Okay, which it usually isn't. And by the time we were leaving, the smog was starting to come in. But again, they clear it out. The communist government can do that. Okay, a dictatorship can do that. They can just, and as Jason Bourne told us at one point, he said, you don't challenge them. If they're going to build a dam, okay, they're going to build a dam. You're not going to file a lawsuit and look for environmental impact statements or something. They're just going to do it, okay? And you cannot stop what's going to happen. You have to go along with it. And but because, you know, I guess the positive side of that is you look at their train system, okay, or their new highway system and things like that, which are well in advance of what we have, okay, because they simply do it. They do it. They don't, you know, as they said under Mussolini in Italy, the trains ran on time. It was nice. Okay, there's a lot of other negative things maybe. Okay, in China today, there seems to be much more positive things now that they've supplanted Mao and some of his ideas have moved on. But still, it's a dictatorship. It really is. I mean, it's a republic. It's a republic. You elect a local leader, that leader, they elect others, and then, you know, but the people at the top are the people at the top. And they are not directly elected by the populace at all. Okay, but it's a republic.
And I think we're going to go to Yellow Mountain because I found it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll skip around. It doesn't matter to you guys anyway. So,
You're okay with that?
the Yellow Mountain is one of these sites that it was supposed to be incredibly beautiful, painted more than any other Chinese site, apparently for centuries. And I actually had bought this, which is the Yellow Mountain. I didn't know where it was. I bought that in Hong Kong when I was in the Navy 50 years ago. And then I went to the Yellow Mountain. I realized this is it. That's that painting at home. And in the ticket to go up, they have a tramway that takes you up, and that ticket is the same picture as this, actually. You have this rock here, here's the rock, here's the mountains behind it, and here's the pine trees. So, and even the rocks around the pine tree are here. So it's the exact same spot that was, again, painted over and over again. And very, very beautiful. The problem is rains all the time, like 85% of the time it's raining. But that's part of the beauty too. So it depends on the breezes and the wind and, you know, the fog moving through, and you see all kinds of different paintings of it.
Where is that located?
That is Hangshan, which is out here, right out here. And it's right near the tea plantations that we were taken to as well. The tea plantations were close by there, and I have to keep my train of thought as I'm watching it. I can't look at that because the tea plantation was very good. What's interesting, we had been, that was part of our itinerary, they're going to take you to the Dragon Well tea plantation, which is this renowned tea from Hangshan. Hangshan, there's an awful lot of tea plantations around there. And we did buy some tea from that area, but not from the Dragon Well. The Dragon Well tea, it turns out, is it's medicinal, and they sell it as medicinal. And we got a hard sell, a super hard sell. And they bring, because they're always trying to sell you things. We were taken to a freshwater pearl factory where they were producing jewelry. We were taken to a silk factory where they manufactured all kinds of silk items, and they had examples of silkworms and how it all spread up. And then they were selling you comforters and clothes and all kinds of different things. At the Dragon Well tea, it was crazy expensive. We were going to get some, and for a little tin, it was like $45 or something. And
But you couldn't buy just one.
but you couldn't buy
You
one.
had to buy several.
You had to buy two, I
Yeah,
think.
it was really
And
amazing.
and then they would give you a little
Capitalism
free
too.
one with it or something. And yeah, most people got up and kind of, after the hard sell, and everybody had a sip of the tea, and it was very nice, okay. And we left, and if you wanted, what they say, if you wanted to buy it, the first one to come up and buy this will get this extra one. And so there were, 4 or 5 people who did buy tea, but the rest of us kind of, out of a group of
Hundreds of
about
dollars.
30.
It's amazing.
The rest of us went out there and just kind of shook our heads and then bought some tea somewhere else. That was good enough, you know.
So this is the cruise.
This is the cruise, yeah. And we went through the Three Gorges Dam. So I do have a map here showing a little bit of that. We landed in Jingzhou here, and we took the cruise. This was the length of the cruise right here. Okay. And what they've done is they've dammed up the Yangtze River, which constantly flooded and caused all kinds of terrible situations, death and everything else. And so they've dammed it up. And the Three Gorges Dam is incredible. It's, I think it's 11 times the capacity of like Hoover Dam, something like that. It's this huge project. It's actually scientists have determined that it's actually slowed the rotation of the Earth because it has moved a lot of this water into one place. Okay, a lot of fresh water. Not much. It's like 0.06 milliseconds. Okay, so it hasn't changed it much, but it did change it a hair, and they have flooded a huge amount of area. And it was just incredible. They take you through three gorges. So here's a map of the Yangtze River, and we wound up in here's the dam. So Jingzhou right here, and then we went up past the dam, and then we traveled to Chongqing over here. It was a 4-day cruise, and you go through the Three Gorges. And there's three gorges, and I have a book back here, which I'm getting passed on. Yeah, the gorges are incredible. There's 3 of them. This was actually Wu Gorge, which was only one of them, and I'll just pass that around and everyone get a look at it. Like somebody had said it was comparable to like the Grand Canyon. Well, there's no real comparison because it's apples and oranges. You know, the Grand Canyon is the Grand Canyon, and the Three Gorges are the Three Gorges. They're both incredibly beautiful and one of a kind kind of thing. But it was very, very interesting. They had flooded a huge amount of territory and moved 1.3 million people out of the way. And so what they did, I forget exactly what the whole thing cost, but billions of dollars. And I'm going to say like $30 billion to do this. And it was completed they started in, I think, 1996, and it was working in 2012. And whatever they spent, so they spent $30 billion, they spent a third of that moving people. Okay, now the lucky people were moved up, because in some cases they flooded an area something like what was it, 300 meters. So it's a huge, just a huge amount of water. And they moved. I think they wiped out like 13 cities, 140 towns, 1,600 villages. Okay, so they had a lot of people to move, and the lucky ones were simply moved up to other cities that would be above this or near it. Some were moved into the surrounding area of the province, and the unlucky ones were moved to distant provinces. But the government didn't just say, get out. I mean, they spent a lot of money moving people and trying to make it as palatable as possible.
These are some of the people here who were moved. They may have been moved up. I think they had to have been. You'll notice that there is no grass. I never saw a lawn while we were there. When we were on the train, when we were on buses, if there is a house that has a little bit of earth around it, they're growing vegetables. If they don't have a car parked in front of it, they have a vegetable garden. And I think it was bok choy that we were there in November, and I think it's bok choy that was growing at that time. And these are more houses. These are the lucky people who were able to stay.
The gorges are incredibly beautiful.
Amazing.
Absolutely beautiful.
And what is the name of
Oh, yeah, we went into the,
They put us on smaller,
yeah,
Craft.
the Goddess Stream.
the goddess stream, and things got very narrow and very high, and it was just amazing. And that took quite a long while, and finally we ended up at this station area, and they entertained us. You know, it was really very nice. Very nice. That's a pagoda partway up. And these are more, and they have these lovely gardens, tiered gardens, and these are tangerine. This is a tangerine plantation.
Do you ever see sun?
See what-
Do you ever see the sun?
Yeah, I know,
Oh, I
we,
know.
a lot of clouds when we were
Yeah.
there.
This was a
I
pretty
think
good
November
day right
might not
here.
be the prime time.
This is the precious stone fortress. It's very, very old. Joe went in that. What did that look like inside?
Yeah, it's a wooden pagoda, and at the top is a, what do you call it, a temple on top. This is the red pavilion, and goes back into ancient China. But again, you know, we've taken a number of these tours, and we throw so many facts and figures and numbers at you. It's hard to keep it all straight. It really is. And so this was interesting. I took a bunch of pictures, and then I got home and said, okay, what is this? But it, you know, part of ancient China, it used to be way high up on a mountain, and now it's at the level of the lake. Okay, so they didn't flood it, although they covered over when they built that Three Gorges Dam. They covered like 1,000 different, at least 1,000 different archaeological sites and things like that. I mean, they just did it. But the feeling was they needed to do this to stop floods and all the bad things that are going on. But they don't know exactly what this is going to lead to either. You know, if apparently it's built over a couple major fault lines. And so you could have an earthquake. And if that dam lets go, I didn't want to think what's going to happen. So, you know, it may not, you know, but again, you don't argue with the Chinese government when they decide to do something, so they do it.
This was a city of displaced people, and they make a good part of their living selling items to people as they get off the boat for a tour of the town. It was a really lovely little town. This was shrimp. I just had to take this picture. This is the size of our cruise ship.
That is
It was really large, you know?
How many passengers?
600 something, 650, something like that. And it was beautiful. It was very nice. The rooms were great. We had a king-size bed and a little balcony outside, and everybody did.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if everybody had a king-size bed, but we lucked out. I think when we got there was something wrong with our original room. They moved us to another room that had a king-size bed. Okay.
It's an example of
And,
the cities that are just mushrooming throughout the country. China apparently has 80 to 90% of the world's cranes, and they are building nonstop. And these things are just popping up, and you'll be in the countryside, and you'll see off in the distance a city being built from scratch.
I think as we were coming into Shanghai,
Yeah.
if we're coming into Shanghai, which is incredibly big, that's like 26 million, I think. I was counting cranes at one point on the bus. In one spot, I said, I want to count all the cranes I can see, and I counted 27. And I know there was some behind high-rise buildings that I couldn't see. And outside of Shanghai, like 30 miles outside, they're building another city that's going to have about 15 to 20 million people. And they said right now it's not ready. There's only about 500,000 living there, mostly students. But they're building everything from scratch. It had to be, you know, the city, the infrastructure, bridges, roads, sewers, everything from scratch. And the high-rise building is incredible. And what they've determined is that you can build high-rise much better than smaller cities. Not just China, but we were watching a little bit of TV, Chinese TV, from the hotels, and some of it, they always had an anti-Japanese thing about World War II on it, seemed like always. They don't seem to like the Japanese much. Or they're reflecting back to what the Japanese did to China in World War II is what they're doing. So, oh, you can always find that somehow, you know. But there was one discussion I saw, it was architects, and they were from Singapore and China, and they were talking about the value of high-rise living, high-rise apartment buildings, and they were saying, and it did make sense. They said if you build them small, you know, like up to 10 stories, say, what you do is you wind up building a little ghetto, a little area that becomes its own little city, and you know, people don't have any privacy. You could be on the 5th floor and you look out your window and you're looking at somebody else on the 5th floor right next to you, and you're in like a little trap almost. Whereas if you build them high, you can build them so that everybody has a view. Okay, everybody. What they were doing is on the 11th floor they would have every 11th floor they would have an area that would be like a little library and maybe a place to sit and relax, or a little playground for kids, and with beautiful vista views and all of that. And so you could find quiet time there, and you could also take your kids there or whatever. Or you could go down, there'd be a playground at the bottom, but you could do it you could put the same amount of people that you would take a huge area. If they were 10-story buildings, you could put them in an area about the size of a couple football fields. Just build it up, and everybody has a view and all of that. So kind of interesting, and that's what they're doing there.
Okay, we got to kind of hustle, we've got
Yeah,
some
go ahead.
minutes.
I'm sorry.
Okay, this is, we're going to the Panda Zoo. This is at the Panda Zoo. Almost every park would have people doing some form of group dance, Tai Chi, martial arts, and it was really neat. These are red pandas, and these are the pandas. And this is a couple of young ones, and all they did while we were there was wrestle and nap. They were so cute, very playful. They kept them separated from the adults. And this is an adult in a separate pen. And this is just the growth that was just, I'm awestruck by what they were doing. And, you know, I wouldn't want to live there. I don't know how they can build that fast. And
Well, tell them about Ingrid and her family.
oh yeah, they separate their people. They have 2 class systems. You are a farmer or a citizen. A citizen is a citizen of a specific city, and the farmers are the people on the outskirts. Her family, it's very difficult to move from one to another. You're born into this. Her family were a farmer family, but her father, every year they give tests. He took a test, he passed it, he was able to become a citizen, which means he had better job opportunities. So everyone in the family became a citizen. And she's doing very well. She's upper middle class, she has an apartment, they have a little girl. And she said, it's very difficult to move back to be a farmer, and sometimes I regret that. She goes, I feel bad because I would love to have, she lives in probably something, I don't know whether it's like that. She goes, I would love to have a little piece of land to grow some stuff. She goes, it's very difficult to do that. However, I've heard on the news that the Chinese government is trying to encourage people to move back to farming now. So maybe Ingrid will have a chance to do that.
We need food.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. This is where I was taking my walk by myself. I was very visible, and like that young woman's on her motorcycle and trying to figure out what I'm doing there. I was being very careful taking her picture, not to be intrusive, but everybody has these little vehicles that they carry a lot of things in. They attach a cart to it. This is the public works system. This man is sweeping the sidewalk. We found that everywhere we went. The sidewalks are clean. The buildings may be a little run down, but the sidewalks are clean. And that's his vehicle, right there. And that was fascinating. And I just liked this guy a lot. He stopped to talk to a friend. They were building a building, and they had plywood up, and they put posters on the side of the plywood, and I had to take that picture and that picture. That's just a picture of our hotel lobby area. The hotels are very, very nice. That's Ingrid, and she was amazing. Shanghai. Okay, Shanghai is extremely modern. It almost looks like it's part of a science fiction. We saw a lot of buildings in good, nice cities that were crooked. They do that deliberately. It's just modern art. This is across the river, and this is the old Shanghai when the States and a lot of European countries had their embassies there and pretty much controlled things. I just like to get people on the street scenes. A lot of people wear their masks. Either they're sick or the smog is bothering them. This is the silk factory. Museum. Lovely museum. And here are the river pictures. This is a saipan, but it has a motor. I don't think they live on that, but they travel back and forth from neighbor to neighbor, wherever they have to go with that. And I think that's as far as I can go right now. Are there any questions?
What did you tour in Shanghai?
In Shanghai, it was the silk factory, and there was a museum. That's the only time I saw a patch of grass in front of the museum, just a little patch.
Yeah, the museum was interesting because, they had a number of artifacts. Most of them had been saved by, there was a Chinese man who had lived in Manila, and he saved all kinds of Chinese artifacts. And then he donated them to the museum because during Mao's era, they were destroying all that stuff. Okay, and so they don't have a lot of, and they're now trying to collect things from around the world. That's why you'll notice if you watch, the antique show, Antiques Roadshow or something, if somebody has something jade or something from ancient China, the price is up because the Chinese are trying to buy these things at auctions and bring them back to China because so much was lost during those years. This is one of my impulsive buys. I don't really know where I'm going to wear this.
Could have worn it last month.
That was like $4.50 or something. And this, just to give you an idea, this is some of these books. This was like a tour book, and so there's a picture of our tour groups. Now we had about 30 people. There were 3 buses, so 3 buses with about 30 people each. But you didn't mix. You were with your busload of people, even though it was all considered one group. You're with your busload and you ate. Matter of fact, they would sit us down. The food was very, very good, but it was very authentic. And some people started complaining about it. So what you had was, you would eat at a restaurant or whatever, and they would put you at a round table, and it was the same on the ship, although the food was a little better on the ship, actually, I think, than some of the restaurants we went to. But it was always good. It was always real good. You'd be at a round table. It would sit about 10 people, and they would bring out trays of food and put it on, and it was like a big lazy Susan that they put it on, and you would spin and you would take a dish and put it on, and so they would put about 8-10 different dishes out there, and you usually had some pork or some chicken, a lot of vegetable dishes, and different things like that. And depending on where you were, in Beijing it might be slanted in one direction, get down in southern China, Szechuan would be a little hotter, a little more hot sauce and things like that. But very, very good. Few people were complaining that, well, it's all the same, but it's like, well, yeah, but you got a choice of 12 things, 10 or 12 things, so you can get in. I think Sinorama was trying to save a little money, so they would give you you could have all the food you wanted, they give you one beer. If you want a beer, you get a glass of beer. And when that beer's gone, if you want another one, you gotta buy it, okay? And, that seems reasonable. On the ship, it was the same, basically. On the ship, you could, like any cruise, you could buy a bottle of wine, and they would bring it out to your table for you every night, and that sort of thing. But very, very good. I thought the food was pretty authentic and done well. A few times you'd be in a place where you would get, we're at a buffet in Shanghai, a very expensive hotel. The hotels are beautiful. And they had, they would always have food for the Westerners, and so you could get an omelet or whatever you wanted in the morning. But they would have things for the Chinese as well. And because we're not the only ones staying there. And this one fellow from Florida who was ethnic Chinese, he had come from Taiwan, and he was a pharmacist in Florida, and his wife was from Hong Kong. And so they're both ethnic Chinese, but had lived in the U.S. a long time. And he says, oh, they have salty eggs. I haven't seen that in years, So I said, what's a salty egg? Well, a salty egg was a duck egg. It looked like it had been boiled and halved. And so kind of bigger and richer, darker than a chicken egg, and then very, very salty. It must have been preserved with salt. Okay, but it was something from his childhood that he, so I ate a few of those, and then they had these little fish look like minnows, and the whole thing's there. I mean, the heads, and they're all in some sort of hot sauce, and those are good too. So you have to experiment and try different things. I didn't eat the scorpions, the fried scorpions. I drew a line there. But the food in general was very, very, very good, I thought, and very authentic. Yeah, and the hotels are great. So we've kind of gone over. Anybody have any questions or anything?
Do they still only allow one child per couple?
No.
It's two now.
It's two. I think.
And so what that is, Ingrid explained that to us, when she had her child, little girl, it was one child policy. And if she had had a second child, she would have been fined the equivalent of $30,000 US. And she said they based it by your wealth. There was a very, very wealthy person who lived nearby, and he had 3 children, and everybody knew it, but nobody said anything. And then she said he must have made somebody mad, because the authorities came, and they fined him the equivalent of $1 million US. Yeah, they don't fool around with that,
So
But now it's a 2-child policy. I have a feeling Ingrid, she was probably in her 40s, do you think? I don't know if the...
Yeah, early 40s, maybe
Yeah.
late 30s.
Yeah.
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 And
But I got the impression, I don't know if you got this, that if you were a farmer, there was no 1-child policy.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but in the city, it was
Now,
1-child.
Jason Bourne there, he had said that
Yeah,
he was the third child, or the second child.
and his
It
family
was a
was
one-child thing,
Yeah.
and he was the second child, and his father had to pay a fine equal to buying a house.
Oh my gosh.
And now he had a daughter, and of course, if you went back in Chinese history, daughters were not considered important at all. They'd be sold or sometimes even killed, and he had a daughter, and he over and over impressed on us that he loved his daughter, just absolutely loved her, adored his daughter. Things have changed.
Are there still a lot of children that are available for adoption there?
I don't think so, because it seems like there's still a lack of little children. You don't see a lot of
No,
little
you don't
children.
see many
We're at the
children.
Great Wall, and this 4th grade
Yeah.
class showed up, and saw a whole
Yeah.
bunch of them. Other than that, you didn't see children all over the place. And somebody even told us that if you're there with a child,
Yeah.
they would come up and want to see the child and maybe hold the child or something like that. Older people. So, but it's, it's a much more open society in a lot of ways, but it is still a dictatorship. So you got to play by the certain rules. But Jason Bourne, I keep calling him Jason, I should just call him Jason, I think. We had just come from Beijing, we met him, and he said, so you came from Beijing? And we said, yeah. And he said, no, he says, I've never been to Beijing. He says, but I've been to Washington, D.C. 10 times. And what he was a tour guide that was bringing tours over to the United States. And he said, as his daughter was getting a little older, he wanted to stay home, and also he said the jet lag was killing him, and so he stopped doing that, and now he's doing tours in China specifically. He was really good. We had one tour guide on the Goddess Stream, and her name was Celery, and because she liked celery. So, I mean, they chose names that you would know, that you would be comfortable with. It's the only one that chose a vegetable, as far as I know. Everybody else was, a person, but it was quite good. And Ingrid at one point, one thing that made some people nervous, as soon as you checked into a hotel, and we're moving around in China, and the hotels are beautiful, and they're all set up for Westerners. Not just for us, but for Westerners. Again, broadening everything. But as soon as you checked in, they collected your passports. Okay? And as long as you're there in the hotel, if you're staying there maybe 3 days or whatever, the hotel holds your passports. And they want to know where you are, is what it is. They don't want you wandering off somewhere. They want to know where you are. And so at one point, we left, and she collected the passports, and then we had to catch the bus, and we were leaving out of there, and somebody said, it was late too, we're toward Shanghai, and so we've been on this tour for a while, and she was very nice. She was a dry sense of humor, and somebody said, when do we get our passports back? And she said, what passports? And everyone laughed, except the person who asked the question. And he said, the passports that you collected, 2 days ago or whatever. And she said, oh, I sold those. And everyone laughed again. And then she said, I'll give them back to you when we get to the hotel. It's hard to hand them out on the bus now. We had to get right on the bus. So don't worry about it.
How did they treat Americans?
Oh, very.
What did they feel? How do they feel about Americans?
Yeah, very good, I thought. I mean, they were very friendly, very nice. There's a lot of Chinese tourists that come here.
Yes. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and actually a major place that Chinese tourists go to is Salem, right down here. And that's because of the China trade
Oh, sure.
that was started, that was one of the first, the major China trade opened in China was from Salem. And so they go to see the Peabody Essex Museum, and then the Phillips House has a lot of artifacts in it itself, which are Hawaiian and other Asian and so on.
And they're trying to move those to Raleigh.
Huh?
They're trying
Yes.
to move those to a facility
Yes.
in Raleigh.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
The museum wants to close Phillips and another building. And they're going to they want to move all the things from there to a
documents, yeah.
facility in
Yeah.
Raleigh.
No kidding. Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Public. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
That's
There was an
interesting.
article in yesterday's.
Yeah, yeah, the Peabody Essex is a great museum, but they have tons of stuff that is in their back rooms,
Yeah,
which
that's
is not out
the
there.
thing. They're trying to change it from a maritime,
Oh, yeah,
push the maritime
to the side, that's too bad.
side. It
That's
is
really
really
too
bad.
bad. I used to like the old museum
Yes.
before they made the
Yes.
big additions. So it reminds me of the one in Gloucester, the Cape Ann Museum, which is really
Yeah.
nice. But, anybody else have any questions or anything?
Well, thank you both so much. That was very, very impressive. It was a lot of work for the two of you to put together, but you did a lovely job. I mean, it really gave us a really thorough look at what, you know,
I
live
apologize for the movies
vicariously.
being so crazy.
Well, Linda, I
My
mean, the two of
computer
us
has a
have-
mind of its own and just scrambled everything, and I couldn't
we did-
believe it.
You did beautifully.
Nothing to do with our age.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, nothing to do with my age, no.
Yeah.
I needed a 12-year-old to help me do that.
Well, I might have been able to plan